Hello, I hope that the sound is good today. It's good to be back, and I wasn't sure of what to talk about today. It's been a very busy few days, so I was again a little bit delayed in getting in something ahead of time for you to put your questions to me. But I decided it'd be a good idea to talk about patterns of languages and fluency, because they seem to be things that people often talk about uh, when it comes to language learning, and people talk about fluency and what it means to be fluent, and why, for example, when we talk about fluency in a language, why it's so contentious and what it actually means. And I was having a conversation at the weekend, actually just yesterday, with Robin McPherson, and we were talking about language learning and about sort of different methods and techniques for learning languages, and why some of them seem to appeal to different people, and why some of them work particularly well, some of them potentially are just sort of why we see, I suppose, things that come up again and again and again. And I think there's a lot to do with when people are learning a language, they will understand certain ideas from one person with a particular set of words in one way, but then maybe something will click when you hear it from somebody else said in a different way, with a different context, with different things attached to the ideas. And one thing that clicked for me was when I talk about fluency in a language and what that means. The thing that I realized was you can be or sound fluent with a relatively small amount of language. And it's a little bit like, the Duplo blocks, that you get for Lego. So there's Lego Duplo, which is the sort of the big blocks, and you have the small blocks, the small Lego bricks. And so when you have fewer words, basically you're putting together a house, but you put it together in a very short amount of time, because you are putting together really big blocks, right? So you're able to do it. It looks like a house. It acts like a house in terms of you can still do all the normal stuff with it. But you realize that you're covering a lot of ground with fewer words, and you also realize that you're doing it very quickly. And people who speak the language also understand what you're saying. They recognize it's a house. They recognize that what you've put together are these bricks, but also that they are big and potentially not, with the sort of finesse that you might have with other bricks that you could use. The same way as when you speak your first language or languages, you're able to really be precise in what you mean. And the reason is because you're using the small Lego bricks when you're talking and speaking your own language, or the languages you speak to a first language level, or even languages you speak particularly well. And the reason is because you have more words, more choice. You're able to manipulate the grammar better than if you were to use languages you'd have less experience with. So, like with the Duplo bricks, you maybe set phrases that you learn and you just brick them together in a very easy way. Whereas when you go down to the smaller Lego bricks, what you're doing is you're putting in some real detail into that house. So it takes longer to build the house. The house has more detail to it. The bricks that you're using are smaller, so therefore there is potentially more opportunity to actually commit errors, to make mistakes, because you're manipulating the language in smaller chunks It's not a sort of a plug and play of the really big ones in the same way. And this can, for in the beginning, which is where I think people see this idea of this intermediate plateau, when you start to use smaller chunks, smaller bricks. As you make that transition to the smaller bricks and therefore more detail in your language, as you would build this Lego house of language, what you're doing is you're actually increasing the chances of making mistakes. You're increasing the chances of having bricks missing. And what that means for you as a learner is that you may get feedback about your language ability, your ability to express yourself, that really makes you feel that you haven't really got as far as you've got with the language. And it can be very frustrating. So as you get ability and agility in how to put these bricks together, these smaller bricks, to make the same kind of house but with more detail, it takes time. And so what can happen when you meet somebody who is using just Duplo bricks, and they're big bricks and they make a house very quickly, so they're able to therefore speak very quickly, is that you can see that person, and then you can see somebody who's been through that process and then is on the smaller bricks, but it's taking a lot longer to put things together and is making more mistakes, potentially sounds like more mistakes. What is actually happening is you're observing that process. As a learner, you have that effect of you understand that there are more bricks to put together and it's more complicated because you're not dealing with the big Duplo bricks anymore, you're dealing with the smaller Lego bricks. But as an observer, you can also think that somebody is more at ease and understands the language better or speaks the language better because they're only using the Duplo bricks. So you kind of have both things going on at the same time. Now, as you grow with your languages and you really start to master how to put these small Lego bricks together, these more complicated bits of vocabulary and expressions and turns of phrase, these would be represented for me by like gold bricks that you put in between the small Lego bricks. And what they do is they just embellish the entire building as you get to building sort of palaces or castles with your Lego bricks. So you end up having these things with like sparkly bits in between. And to create those, you really need to study the language for many, many years to really start adding them in. You can absolutely start adding in shiny bricks, even sometimes at the Duplo stage, but they stand out more as something that you maybe just learnt parrot fashion, maybe at the Duplo stage, whereas at the small brick stage, when you're putting the language together, when you put in these sort of gold bricks of really high-end knowledge of the language, with expressions, with proverbs, with turns of phrase, it could be a play on words, it could be a number of things that you may use to show a greater awareness of the language, that actually could turn into something that is just woven through the tapestry of the language itself. And therefore the gold bricks, whilst when the sun shines on them they stand out and sparkle and shine, they make for a very natural part of the building and its design and what you're trying to construct. And so this concept, this idea, this imagery really popped into my head during that conversation with Robin, and I wanted to share it with you because I found that it really helps me to illustrate well how I feel when I learn a language. And I've definitely been through that process myself where I started learning a language and I've been on the Duplo bricks, and I feel like I'm on Duplo bricks for a while. And I'm starting to move into using the smaller bricks, but sometimes when you've got the Duplo bricks and you're starting at those intermediate stages to really build up your vocabulary and expression, sometimes they don't fit together very easily, and it can feel quite frustrating to try and have these sort of huge bricks going together with these smaller ones, and sometimes it can feel quite uneven, a bit awkward. And I think also it explains well that feeling that we have when we have the big bricks and we're trying to force the smaller ones in, of wow, I really haven't mastered this yet, and we feel that we haven't got anywhere, or we're sort of treading water. And I think that is the feeling that we all get when we're learning a new language and we're trying to sort of take our level to level up in the language, to really take our ability to communicate to a higher level. And I think it is exactly that we're playing still with the Duplo bricks and the small bricks and building a house. And of course, it can be uneven and it can feel strange, and it can sometimes feel very easy to go back to the Duplo bricks because they're easier to manage, they're bigger, they just explain one thing. So typically in English, the word nice is one of those Duplo brick words, that everything's nice. It's nice weather, it's nice food, it's nice to meet you, it's everything's nice. But to insert these other bricks of higher level vocabulary, for example, even in your native tongue, right, in your first language, you can feel that need to use the shiny gold bricks. So with the good question, John. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I am seeing your comments and trying to keep my train of thought as well. But I got a question here. What was the term that I used for beginner forcing gold bricks? So something that I have noticed is, and I see this particularly when people want to learn very technical or difficult, seemingly above the level of the language that they're normally learning, right? Language can be uneven at any stage. So even from the very beginning, you could learn a word that is not something that somebody would expect you to know as a beginner in the language. And that's fine. It might be a gold brick. It might be sort of this sort of thing that really wows people normally in language. But the thing is when you use that, and you're really speaking the language with the big Duplo bricks normally, and then you use a gold brick in the middle instead of just starting off with the smaller normal bricks to build up first, is it can stand out as signaling that you know a lot more than you know. And I think this is a trick that people can use to sort of get people to speak in the language or have a feeling that you know more than you actually know, is to use these in kind of a more engineered way. Sometimes it can be that you just come across it and it's similar to a language you already know, right? So it can be done in a very natural way, but it can also feel engineered. And the thing that it does is it sends a message to the people listening to you that you have this awareness of the language, but the rest of your language knowledge isn't there. So it's kind of an unequal and an imbalanced representation of your linguistic ability in a language. So if I were to, I don't know, let's say, for example, if you knew an expression in a language, like it's raining cats and dogs is not a particularly gold brick in English. It's quite a common thing to say. I would say it's bucketing it down would be more of a gold brick type thing. That if you were to say that, or in the UK, for example, it wouldn't sound like a forced thing from a book that you just learned. It would sound more natural to certain people. But if you were to use that, but you only knew it's sunny, it's raining, and it's windy, and then it's bucketing it down. If we were to use that, it would indicate a higher awareness of linguistic ability, particularly in the area of weather. And then, actual fact, the people find out that that's the only thing that you know. You don't know drizzle. You've learned it ahead of a number of words that you would normally learn first, if that makes sense. So I remember when I was learning. So what for me, I've learned languages where I have been naturally confronted by language like that in languages, where I've learnt these expressions first, and then I'm missing, and this is where you have this feeling of gaps, holes, right? So it would be like building this these Duplo bricks, and you're putting some of the bricks in, but then you're missing holes in your walls. But then you put a gold brick on top of it somewhere, and then you've got these gold bricks, but you've got all these holes in it as well. So what happens then is when you speak, you basically represent to your linguistic ability in an uneven way. So one day you will speak it and it will sound really fluid and amazing, and you'll use these fantastic expressions and stuff. And then the next day, and I know I've had this feeling myself, and I've noticed holes, and then you'll speak and you'll make mistakes or not have words that really other people would expect you have, and you might expect you have. Because what happens is when you speak to other people is that they react to the way you talk and to your knowledge, and you also in turn react back to that and have expectations of yourself, which is why I think a lot of the time we get this frustration, particularly with these when we've gone past the very beginning levels and we're starting to move into these smaller brickwork. So I think that this is one of the issues that we have as learners. We really sort of get into this whole reproducing and reflecting the language back to people. I'm going to try and see if I've got any other questions here. Is it necessary to know many words to be fluent? I think you can be fluent or sound like speak in a fluent manner, I think is probably a better way of putting it for me from what I'm discussing now, is you can speak in a fluent manner with Duplo bricks. That's to say, I could just use the word nice in English, okay, and really reduce the vocabulary down as far as possible. It's hot, it's cold, it's sunny, and that could be all the weather vocabulary I know. It's raining, maybe like there are 5 words, right? And then I could move on to the next topic, and I could do the similar thing with the next topic. I could learn the colors, but I could just learn the very basic colors that you have. I could learn the basic animals, the basic food stuffs, all of the basic stuff, right? I could learn all of that and maybe have a couple of thousand words max. But then I could put them together in a very fluid manner, so I could manipulate them very easily. But we're still dealing with the Duplo bricks. These sort of smaller bricks that I'm talking about are when you've got many more words in your arsenal and you're able to manipulate them to a much greater degree of finesse, and to be able to really make your language pop and to show this knowledge that you've gained through often many years of study. And it's these bricks, I think, that when people often think about fluency and whether you speak a language fluently, they're often imagining the small bricked house, not the large brick house with the huge Duplo bricks. But you can give a perception or put across an idea that you do speak a language to a high level with relatively few words, and you can have a conversation. I mean, look, I went on that Estonian TV channel and spoke in Estonian after a month of studying Estonian. My Estonian was on Duplo bricks. I mean, there's no other way around it. It's what it was on, Duplo bricks. And I went, I organized the meeting because I'd done things like being able to agree days and times and all of that stuff. I did all of the organization in Estonian with the people. And then when the questions came around, they were all very ordinary questions that you'd get. I have a small Lego brick house in Estonian? No, I don't, because sometimes I'll get endings wrong because I don't know how they all fit together perfectly. Because you have to learn what goes in between the smaller bricks. Sometimes it surprises you. So in English, we will often hear people making a mistake with the I want to continue playing, and they might say I want to continue to play, or some other version where you can't have both or you can only have one, and because you've learned just the Duplo bricks, you just sort of keep putting things together. And the meaning isn't always the same, and you don't learn these differences unless you've had a lot of exposure and a lot of learning, a lot of time. And so these tend to end up getting into the smaller brick finesses of the language. Let me see if I can figure out. Okay, bonsoir. When do you start talking to natives? En italien, je commençais à parler tôt, car le français et l'italien sont proches. Pour le japonais, j'ai entendu le connaître plus de vocabulaire. Oui, enfin, ça dépend de toi, en fait, quand tu veux. Moi, je commence, ouais, au début, quoi, je commence à parler avec les gens. Et pour moi, il y a ça, je pense pas trop à ça, quand je parle avec quelqu'un, soit quelqu'un avec les connaissances des langues, comme une langue maternelle ou bien première langue, disons. Mais pour moi, c'est plutôt pour pratiquer, quoi. Donc ça, c'est vraiment c'est une question assez personnelle. Si pour toi, je veux dire, toi, tu es pas à l'aise avec, tes connaissances pour parler avec quelqu'un du pays ou qui parle la langue comme langue maternelle, paternelle, première langue, hem c'est pour moi, je crois que ça m'aide à vraiment utiliser, mes langues avec des gens qui parlent les langues que je parle ou que j'apprends, parce que juste pratiquer les langues en général, pour moi, ça m'aide. I've been teaching English to my sister, and I've realized that most of my English fluency comes from sheer memorization of patterns rather than deep understanding of why they work. Thoughts? Juan, absolutely. So this is where the bricks come in. So when we learn bricks together that go together, often with the Duplo bricks, they tend to be like sort of whole phrases or words, and we just slot them on, right? And they take up half of the sort of the green. Normally, it's a green area or a gray area that you put them on, right? The big bricks. And you put them on and you don't even think about it. You just do it because you know that means that. And that's how you express this idea. And so you just go for it. And you don't necessarily need to know the details as to why the grammar. And then you can start replacing them with the smaller bricks. But then you do need to be more conscious if you're going to do it in a way that they fit together properly and are sort of done in a natural way so that the house looks like a cohesive and well put together piece. You do need to make sure that the bits in between fit. And that's where maybe not knowledge of grammar, but at least a long and exposure to the grammar and to the language and how it works naturally is really important. One should accrue tools to encourage continuance in the target language. Absolutely. Absolutely. Richard, hi everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you for joining. How can you improve your Persian quickly? It depends. So, I mean, if you're going from zero, improving quickly is fairly okay to do in terms of you're learning the big chunks of language, right? So to go from 0 to 100 words already, you could start saying quite a lot of stuff because you couldn't say anything at all before. If you're talking about the intermediate stages where you sort of already put together, I know, sort of a basic house, a Duplo house, as soon as you start talking about taking that into the realms of, you know, putting the smaller bricks in and being able to really you know, to really go for you know, the finesse of the language, then that takes a lot of time. Because if you imagine how many bricks you need to make a house, I could talk to you in a way to express an idea, okay? And I could use very basic vocabulary. The idea may be very sort of a global idea, just a general this is what I think, and this is my message. But if I want to add the detail into that, I need a lot more words, therefore a lot more smaller bricks, and it takes time because I may need a longer sort of amount of time to do it. I don't know if you've ever come across books where you have the original book that was written in a very complex way with sort of a lot of vocabulary, and then you have maybe a version written for children with fewer complex words. Some scenes might be cut out, but the story is pretty much the same. Roald Dahl used to write books like this. He'd write an adult version, a children's version, and then you might get the notes book. So that is basically the story, and it's really thin, and you get the notes on it. The notes is kind of like the Duplo version. And then you've got the children's book, which is like this. And that children's book is like the basic small brick version. And then you've got the adult version, which is like a lot thicker with a lot more words. That's the children's version with lots of gold bricks in between, so that it shines and sparkles and it's all, lots of things happen. The children's book could have a few gold bricks in it, of course, but the adult version was the one with all the gold bricks in. The actual idea of the book and the story and the concept is the same. It's the same height and it's the same type of thing. It's just that when you look at the detail of all three, there's a huge difference. So that's why I think fluency can feel possible when you're talking about the notes, when you're talking about the children's book, and then when you're talking about the adult's book. And this is where I think we get a bit sidetracked and lost when it comes to these types of things. And this also leads on from what I was talking about last week, which was this idea of a false dichotomy when it comes to learning a language or a few languages to a very high level, in terms of going very deep into the languages, into their literature, into their culture, into their history, whatever it is that you're interested in, and then picking up other languages and having them as kind of a fun thing to do on the side. Now, it would be the equivalent of building kind of this really ridiculous castle out of Lego that's really pretty and beautiful to look at with lots of the gold bricks in between. And everyone's like, wow, it's amazing. What an amazing castle you've built. And then next to it, you build a Duplo house, which is kind of like huge bricks. And people are like, yeah, it's functional. It does what it says on the tin, but it's not the castle next to it. It's never going to be. It might be if you start replacing the bricks slowly but surely, you might get closer to the castle. But do you need to? Do you need 2 castles? Do you need 3 castles or 4 castles? Do you just need lots of these Duplo houses? Or do you need some in between where you have kind of the children's book version, with just the small bricks? Thank you very much, language comment. Thank you. So these are kind of my thoughts of of language and sort of I hope you like these analogies. It's quite actualmente vivo en Florida, pero mi mente de vida es ser neurocientífico, estudiar cómo el cerebro procesa y crea el idioma. Muy bien, qué interesante, ¿no, Carlos? Thank you. Thank you for your comments. I used your coupon, my coupon. Okay, thank you. I don't know what my coupon is. Oh, on italki. Thank you. Yeah, please do use please do use that if you can. It's great because it shows italki that that I do share it. Also, it's quite useful for you because you get this money, extra cash towards your lessons. Thank you, Roger. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Do analogies mostly help the framing of language learning before actually getting into the weeds? How do analogies help in the finer details? I find that what they help with, my analogies, personally, and when I hear analogies that I find resonate with me, is it helps me to order things and to understand and accept things more easily, because it I think as human beings, we seek very often a way to order things in a fashion that just helps us to make sense of the world around us and what's going on in our heads as well. Uh, and I think sometimes not being able to do that can cause a bit of pressure, maybe, or anxiety sometimes as well. If we're not able to hold a mirror up and see our face, it would be a bit disconcerting, to not be able to sort of really see what's going on, with with the reality that maybe we perceive something, we have something else going on in our heads. So why is that not happening? Why is that not working? Recognizing that we have a Duplo house or a small brick house, or we're working on our castle, is quite a useful thing to be able to do, because at least we can then take a very honest look at what we're doing and what we want to do. I mean, there's no reason why a huge castle with the amazing bricks inside can't sparkle and shine, and then in the garden they have a number of Duplo houses that are just there because, hey, we need to store things, we need to do other things, we need to have hobbies, we need to do other fun things, right? So I find that it's useful to be able to look at things in that way, and it helps us to get less frustrated with our progress and with what we're doing. So if we can look at our languages in that way, I would say that it can be quite handy. I literally looked at patterns in language learning today, and you also happen to make a stream about it. Well, yeah. So Alex, I find that patterns in languages are really interesting. I mean, when I was at school, particularly, we studied literature. So one of the things that we used to learn were patterns on how to describe the characters, how to describe the story, and we'd have set phrases, and then we'd swap in and out of those set phrases, sort of elements of the story, right, to talk about it and to describe what was happening. And it was a good training wheels way to really be able to write about sometimes quite complex things. But it was definitely a slot things in and out. And I think that's a very valid way to learn languages. And I think that's basically what we do to a large degree when we speak languages. We use set phrases. And this is why when people use certain famous ones that have become proverbs or have become sort of almost national treasures in the language that you would insert in, like these gold bricks I was talking about, they stand out, and they still impress. Okay, what's the main step we should take to understand fast native content better? Just keep listening to more. Yeah, I think it's exposure is the key thing. Exposure is really important. Nowadays, you can actually slow things down a bit, so you can actually slow down audio, and sometimes we also have opportunities to pop on some subtitles as well. That kind of thing can help to sort of get you used to it, to pick things out. Often using them as a talking point for a class as well can be helpful, because you can listen to something with a teacher or with a language partner and discuss it and discuss what's being said and try and pick out and train your ability to find these sort of the natural flow of language and the things that people tend to use. But yeah, exposure is the key. Are these bricks, like for example, someone who says, I go to store. Okay, I go to store instead of I'm going to the store. Yeah, so yeah, exactly, Joe. They might be missing bricks. They might just know I go store. So if you're teaching a language and you wanted people to be able to say things, it would be good to have that as kind of a Duplo brick, right? Um, I'm going to the shops. I'm going to the swimming pool. I'm going to the cinema. And you would teach them I'm going to the, and then you would change out. So the things that would change are not the to and the. It would be cinema, shop, swimming pool. And then you know that they're going to get the grammar right because the grammar is one Duplo brick. And then you teach them, I'm going on holiday. or vacation if you're teaching US English. But you could teach them the different ways of saying different things later, and they could then be added in. But that's, I think, is probably a better way round to do it. It means you're giving them the dupla bricks that they know, they can trust, and they go forward, and it works. I found that since having memorized the Greek alphabet, it's somewhat manageable to read Cyrillic. Yeah, well, I mean, the Cyrillic alphabet is based off, a lot of the letters are based off the Greek as well. So yeah, I mean, it's going to help. The two alphabets are similar. I do find shoddy houses shine in fascinating ways due to the builders' cultural idiosyncrasies. I hope to broaden the scope of phrase construction in studying other cultures' approaches. Yeah, John, I mean, absolutely. There are certain things as well that I think are quite nice to pick up on from other people's ways of speaking. So yeah, I mean, imperfections can become beautiful, and I absolutely agree. I do find this okay. So yeah, maybe the key to learning or gathering bricks is to keep interesting, but didactic materials tends to be really dull. Do you agree? How do you keep it interesting? I think it's a bit like Sudoku, right? So I mean, I see Sudoku as a game that you play, and often it's not particularly challenging to play Sudoku. I mean, I can play it for a certain amount of time, but the reason it's interesting is it's because you're putting things together and slotting them and finding out how they fit together, right? And you find that solution. And that's a bit like how it feels when you put language together and you find that you're putting it together in a meaningful way and then getting a reaction. And I think it's the reactions that keep me going, because you're putting things together in different ways to figure out a different way of communicating different ideas, new ideas, and sometimes unique ideas as well for people. So absolutely, that's what keeps it interesting for me. But yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, you do need to go through a similar process with each new language, and it's I mean, I'm talking about it in these sort of bricks, but these bricks need to be learned and they need to be put together. And when you do start putting them together, particularly in the beginning, it can be really, really interesting. When you start to put together the smaller bricks, you can almost lose sight of the bigger construction, right? And so it can get a little bit daunting sometimes when you're replacing the duplo bricks with the smaller bricks. It's a natural thing that we can get stuck and lost in the detail, and we don't get to zoom out so much. I think it's always important to be able to zoom out. Could you start doing interviews with polyglots, like asking them about when and how they fell in love with language, okay, and how they fit into the world and what experiences they've attained? I could potentially, Alex. I do sometimes feel that it's been done to death a little bit. If there's anyone in particular that you think hasn't, or if potentially, I never say never. I just feel that there have been quite a lot of conversations like that, and there are still. I did an interview myself today with someone on Instagram, and I always wonder how interesting it is for people to hear about that kind of thing anymore from me. But I get there's probably is some interest out there generally for people. Not talking about myself. But yeah, I mean, if there's somebody in particular you think you've not heard from, or you'd like to, or you'd like me to talk to, then feel free to let me know. I never think of doing that anymore, but yeah. But some people are stuck on that bad grammar and missing bricks mode and never find the grammar because it becomes a habit for them. Absolutely, Joe. Absolutely. So for some people, the bricks the bricks aren't perfect. So sometimes they don't fit in. Sometimes they don't go together properly. And look, I mean, sometimes we'll never will never get rid of all the mistakes. And even first language speakers, monolinguals, will make mistakes in their own language, right? The one language they have. And so is it necessarily a bad thing to make a mistake? Possibly not. Can you iron out all mistakes? I don't think so. I think that there's always going to be some room for error for most people. If not, no, actually, no, I didn't say most people. For everyone, I've never met anybody who speaks any language perfectly. So yeah, it's normal. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think you're talking more about these baked in mistakes, these sort of mistakes that, particularly with for Slavic speakers, it will be with definite and indefinite articles. They will find it challenging, and it's natural that many of them find it challenging because they don't have the same articles as we do in English. Similar thing with the various forms of the present tense and the continuous tenses in English can be challenging for a number of speakers because they just don't exist in the same way. But can they get the message across, and does it matter so much? Depends on what they're doing, but I think generally it's fine. I don't know if you ever finish a house. I think that you're always working on it, so there's always things to do. And sort of, let's say, even say the castle, right? So you've got this person who studied, and they've built this castle with all of the beautiful golden bricks and stuff in it, and it looks beautiful to look at. But the rain will always come, and one of the roofs will get a leak. There'll be a hole. The water will come in, and it will need to be repaired. So there's always something that's going on, and I think that's normal. I think that's absolutely normal. So that's not just for languages. That happens in a number of subjects. So pretty much everything I know, people will. If you're a historian, you may make a mistake with a date or a fact about a battle or about a dynasty or something. Or if you're a scientist, you may make a mistake with, I don't know, one of the chemicals, or one of the reactions, or one of the names of a star, or whatever. It might be anything, but there's always room for error, and and I think we wouldn't be human if we didn't make any mistakes at all. Also, I thought I would mention that Alexander Arguelles has started to make videos again. Yeah, I saw a couple of them, Alex. It's very nice to see him actually on YouTube. I've seen a couple of his videos. It's really, really cool. Thanks for mentioning that, because you never know, I may not have seen them. I don't get to see that many of the language videos. Some of them get recommended to me every now and again, and I will click on them, but I don't go out searching for them so much. I think partly because of time. Unfortunately, I don't have the time that I once did. But when I do see them, I'm very happy. Yeah, Professor Alexander Arguelles' videos are always quite insightful. How do I cram HSK2 within 10 days? Oh my word. Okay, wow. I don't know, buy a special brain and have it installed in your head. I have no idea. It sounds like a big thing to do, but I'm sure you. Yeah, I'm sure you'll just keep looking at it. I suppose it's just going to be constantly. I mean, if it's for the actual exam, I guess it's taking lots of the exams, like past papers and stuff, will help if you want to do that. So I would always advise you to do past papers if you're getting ready for an exam. They're the ones that will really help you have exposure to the material that you need to dominate. What's the motivation behind language learning? To communicate. For me, it's to communicate with other people and to understand their history, culture, and the mindset, because a lot is carried in the language. So things that you're not often exposed to just through regular study of things. I mean, that for me, that's the thing. And to be able to say things that are in my head in a different way with different words and different grammar, For me, they are really key things. Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm glad that you like my perspective on mistakes. I don't really worry about mistakes too much myself. I think that they're very normal. Thank you, Lillian, to hear this. I'm intermediate in French and just started Italian, and I've been interested. Okay, it's been interesting juggling, trying to find a rhythm. Yeah, it takes time to sort of get your find your stride when you're taking on new languages and you've studied similar ones. It's completely normal. So just be kind to yourself and take it easy. You'll get there. It's always possible, and they do help each other to a degree. These languages, when they're from the same family. Do you see the fluency of understanding, listening, as the same as fluency of speaking? Ooh, good question. So Juan, for some languages, yes, I think there's a very good correlation. Some languages actually have a kind of a diglossia when it comes to speaking and listening to original content in the language. So a language like Finnish is a good example. So Finnish, spoken Finnish and written Finnish are quite different in a lot of ways. Arabic would be another one. So you could study MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, Fusha, and you could get fairly competent in speaking Fusha, and then you then go and start speaking to people who use Arabic, and they're using their own variety of Arabic. It's not Fusha that they naturally speak on the streets. So sometimes you can get quite fluent in speaking, and then the understanding takes time because maybe you haven't focused on a certain way of using the language. So they can be different, but they can also be similar as well. So I mean, some languages are very much, what you read and what you say is fairly comprehensible. I mean, not all varieties of German, but German, for example, is a language where I find if you learn standard German and you go to Münster, for example, in Germany, it's fairly straightforward to understand what you hear. I don't think it's particularly different. If you go to different parts of the German-speaking world, then obviously there are going to be some barriers. But I think there are some languages like that where the written word, the spoken word, and then understanding how it's spoken, like understanding TV in German, is I find particularly clear compared to some other languages. I've heard that English actually is one of those languages that's difficult for people to say. They can speak, but then when they hear it spoken, there can be it's quite challenging to understand the spoken, particularly from some speakers. Is it possible to learn English grammar using English? Absolutely, yeah. For someone who's intermediate level vocabulary, but almost zero in grammar. I think so, yeah. I think you can. I mean, learning grammar, in a natural way, if you're exposed to the language, you're going to pick up on the grammar because you'll pick up on phrases that people use and how it's put together. So yeah, I think you can. I think that you will need some support potentially and ask questions, but yeah, bearing in mind that a lot of English speakers don't know the grammar of their own language. I would argue orthography should be of primary concern for learners. Your thoughts? Orthography. So writing the language. Yeah, it depends what kind of learner you are. So yeah, if let's say, for example, I don't know, if you're learning, it depends on why you're learning the language, I suppose, is the key thing, right? Why and how you're learning the language. But yeah, I agree that for me personally, learning to read and write the language is quite important because it helps me to visualize the words sometimes and to see it on the page. It helps me to understand how things work and to be able to put things together more easily. I don't know if it's true for everyone, but I definitely find it a support for myself. And I would try it with people and see how they get on with it. And if that's what gels with them. My view is that there are lots of ways to learn languages. And what works for one person doesn't necessarily work to the same degree for the next person. And I think that this is why when we talk about putting things together, this is my conversation with Robin was about this. It's how we put together these ideas and how they link to make a connection for the individual learner. And that for me, I think, is the important thing. It's, you know, it how you use certain techniques and how they work in your life are what's important. And if they gel with you and they work for you, then great. But not everyone, there's no one hard and fast rule. The only hard and fast rule for language learning is exposure, constant exposure. I mean, if you don't do that, you're not going to just like absorb the language from nowhere. That's the only one thing that I think is true for language learning is if you're not doing anything, well, the only thing that's guaranteed is you're not going to learn the language. And the more you do, the more you're going to get out of it. That's the only thing that I think is the one constant with language learning, the one truth, should I say. You put in a 2-week notice for your job and you have plenty of free time to focus on Spanish. And what's better is my parents have offered to pay for my lessons if I get caught up in school. Fantastic, Alex. Congratulations. I like that. Yeah. Houses always have problems. Leaky roof, broken toilet, broken bathtub, exactly. Broken dishwasher, broken everything. Yeah, this is completely true, JR. Absolutely. What do you think of the main challenge? What do you think is the main challenge for learning French for an Italian? Giovanni, pronunciation tends to be challenging because French pronunciation's slightly different. The agreements of gender and plural singular for verb endings, for example. Yeah, pronouncing all of the different things are not like, because in Italian's very phonetic. You pronounce everything, whereas in French you don't pronounce half of what you write, which is I think one of the reasons why I think that sometimes writing can be challenging for some people because you'll end up pronouncing things in a weird way if you get it in your head. So I think that it's important to get the pronunciation right for French and focus on that as an Italian speaker. I guess also different use of subjunctive, for example. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's particularly challenging for an Italian speaker to learn French. I think that it's completely doable, and a lot of people do it very successfully. I mean, look at Luca Lampariello. His French is really, really good, and an Italian speaker. But a number of Italian speakers I've met have learned French well. But the ones where I've noticed they've had more issues is haven't focused on the pronunciation, and therefore they find it challenging for that. Okay, English grammar for Spanish students. Wow. Okay, interesting book. Okay. Kuidas läheb? Ja hästi. Hästi. Kuidas läheb? Because of similar words. Yeah, absolutely. So similar words will help as well with languages. Do you feel that your personality changes when speaking other languages? Nope, I don't. I feel that people perceive me differently through their own cultural lenses because my personality stays the same. And much to the chagrin of some of my friends and family, I can't hide my weird, wacky British sense of humour. And it comes across differently in different cultures because some cultures have that sense of humor, some don't. So, yeah. I find things funny, unfortunately, that people of other languages wouldn't find funny. So particularly that sort of when I play with words and things. Okay. What do I do about being able to use words that I can understand? I know that they're saying, but I can't really repeat it back or use it in a sentence. I ask them to, if you feel you can't say things back and use it back at people, it's probably good to ask them to repeat it until you can, because often when people repeat things or say things back to you, it's maybe they're doing what's called echoing. So you echo back a mistake with a correction, or in a way that's more natural. And a good way to start remembering that and using it is to repeat it back. So make sure or ask them to write it down if that's a possibility. Just say, oh, I really want to make sure I've got that. So could you say it again? Or actually, could you spell that bit, because I didn't quite get it. I find those kinds of things work for that, so that you pick up on it. But if it's something you're noticing that you do need to know, it's quite good to sort of make a more conscious effort to do it. And I think you do sometimes need to make a conscious effort. I would advise against doing it so much that it breaks the conversation down completely. But certainly if it's something that comes up again and again and again, absolutely, there's no reason why you can't do that. French pronunciation is something a lot of non-French people are very proud of, but they're often actually pretty bad at it. Yeah, French pronunciation is I've noticed with people it can be quite tricky. Witam miło cię znowu słyszeć. Okay. How do you learn the correct English pronunciation? By repeating things and recording things and getting feedback, I think is the important thing to do. Väga hästi kõik on korras. Fantastic. Labi. Okay, let's see. I love it. Yes. Imitation is overlooked. We where apes and we learn greatly from plain imitation. Yeah, absolutely, Juan. I think so. Language burnout is also a problem. I'm talking 1 month from Japanese because I wasn't able to concentrate. I was taking 1 month from Japanese because I wasn't able to concentrate, even on the simple words kanji. I'm still learning, but in a more relaxed way to enjoy the process. Yep, I have had similar experiences with Korean, that it just takes a lot of time to get it naturally in my head, and no shame in that at all. I think it's good that you've recognized that you need to take a break, and that you've done that with your own agreement, and then that you're changing the pace in a very deliberate way. I think that's really, really positive. So good on you for doing that. Great. So we've got to an hour. I've very much enjoyed your company, so thank you for joining me today. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed my analogies, and that you enjoyed the discussion about language learning of fluency and what it means, and my lovely houses and different things. But yeah, and a huge thank you to Robin McPherson for sort of sparking this thought in my head yesterday. And yeah, absolutely. So I have learned a little bit of Hebrew. Thank you for the question. And have you ever thought about developing a curriculum for languages? Possibly. I mean, I know how I go about doing it. So I mean, I put together. I've been taking somebody through German in the last since March. So I've been working with people in that way, and I really enjoy it. But yeah, maybe it's something I can do more of. I actually quite enjoy it. I enjoy working with individuals and helping people through the process of language learning. I don't officially do that as my job at the moment, but it's something I enjoy doing. And yeah, I mean, if it was something I could make as a job potentially in the future, why not? Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't live off fresh air. I have to live off things, so it's it's quite challenging to know in terms of like making charges and things like that. You know, it's quite challenging. But yeah, who knows in the future? Um, cool. Thank you, Alex. It's really kind of you. So yeah, until next week, I will look forward to speaking to you again then. And if you have any questions or thoughts about what you want me to talk about or anything else, please do let me know. It was a pleasure to talk to you again. And yeah, looking forward to speaking to you soon. Take care and happy language learning. Bye, everyone.